next speaker, who is Peter Joosten. He's a biohacker and a cyborg futurist who investigates the impact of biohacking, human enhancement, and transhumanism in his keynotes, articles, and on his YouTube channel. And he's also the curator of the platform Superhuman Talks, where he writes and interviews experts about the coming era of upgraded humans. And his talk will focus on transhumanist technologies with the question, can we transcend mankind? Peter,
Hi,
good to see
Peter.
you, and
Thank
looking
you.
forward to your talk very much.
Thank you, Maria and Victor, for inviting me. There's my presentation. Awesome. I actually want to start with a little story. It's the year 2050, and Special Agent J.C. Denton is standing next to the Statue of Liberty in New York. And he's there because underneath, in the bunker of the Statue of Liberty, there are terrorists. And the terrorists, they spread the deadly virus, great death, all over the world. Well, I am playing the character J.C. Denton in a computer game called Deus Ex. And it's the year 2000 and I'm still in middle school. And I really love this game, not only because of the gameplay and the story, which kind of resembles the answer Anders gave to the last question, and also a conspiracy theory concerning COVID, but especially because you have human augmentation in this game. So you can buy special hands, maybe, just like Hard is developing, so you can steadily aim, and you have bionic legs and special eyes with information on your display. And I really love the game. And now, more than 20 years later, actually, I'm not a J.C. Denton. I'm not a special agent, but I'm a biohacker and a cyborg futurist. So I'm also an autodidact. So I'm not a scholar like the other speakers, but it's actually my full-time profession to give webinars, to give keynote presentations, and to do consulting on the topics of human enhancement, human augmentation, biohacking, transhumanism. So how do we as humans look in the future, and what kind of implication, also like Anders mentioned, what kind of ethical questions do arise? And if you like this talk, I also have a YouTube channel and also a blog, and I will share a link to that at the end of my presentation. So let's continue. An interesting question is, what actually makes us human? And there are different answers to that question. And I'm also curious, type in the chat if you have an answer to this question, what makes us human? I will give you a couple of answers. You can think of that we have stories to tell each other, that we can forecast the future, that we can plan into the future, to also think about possible ramifications of our own actions, that we know how other people react, or that we think about it. Maybe also because we as humans, we are conscious, we have consciousness. And I think these are all valid answers. But one really important thing that distinguishes us as humans from other species is our use of technology. That's one of the main points I learned from Professor Peter Balverbeek from your, I don't know, it's a competitor of Eindhoven, I'm not sure, but it's in the Netherlands, Enschede, and he talks a lot about the use of technology, and the use of technology is what makes us human. So you can think of the wheel, of fire, of agriculture, maybe even of the internet. And compared to other animals, we do not have like specific features, like we don't have wings so we can fly, or very sharp claws, or maybe sharp teeth. But what really distinguishes us from other species is the use of technology. And transhumanism technology takes that a notch further. So we do not only use technology to increase our lives, but really lift us up as humans, to become more than human, to, as Anders also mentioned, to elevate the human condition. So I want to zoom in really quick on 3 transhumanist technologies, because the main idea of transhumanism, we see it a lot in popular media. So I'm also curious, if you're watching, please leave a remark. What's your favorite science fiction book or series or movies on the topic of transhumanism? It was also one of my bingo card items, so maybe you will also score some points with that. And because in movies, the transhumanist idea, it has a lot of appeal for directors, for writers, for authors, For example, you just saw Passengers, Transcendence, where we have mind uploading. And maybe you're watching and you think, okay, Peter, that all sounds a little bit science fiction. Well, that may be the case, but one major takeaway of my presentation is that there are already researchers, engineers, entrepreneurs working on all these kinds of ideas and technologies. So the timelines may differ, but they're actually already working on it. And the first technology is, how can we increase our health span and our lifespan? So you are probably familiar that you should have a decent, a healthy lifestyle with enough movement, good nutrition, enough sleep, but also think of your stress levels with the use of meditation and yoga. But still, if you lead a healthy life, that still can get you, I think, till 120 years old. Or there was also a recent study where they say the maximum age that a body can become is 150 years. So there's still like some border in biology. But just like the previous speaker, Anders Sandberg, mentioned, there are already scientists thinking and working on ideas. For example, Aubrey Gray at the SENSE Foundation, Andrea Meyer, and they're looking at different causes of aging, but also different solutions to halt or even reverse the aging process. So you can think of genetics, maybe genetic modification with CRISPR. That might be an interesting question for Kevin Esveld. And you can also, of course, think of your own methods to stay healthy. For example, taking ice baths or doing Wim Hof method breathing. So that's the first one. How can we increase our longevity? And still, compared to the swimming in cold water, you can also use cold to give you a boost with the use of cryogenic therapy. And this is where you get into a cabin for 3 minutes of minus 109 degrees Celsius, so it's about 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and it also gives you a boost to your body. And cryotherapy is becoming more popular, but you should not confuse it with another cryo technology, which is also one of the main transhumanist idea, namely cryonic preservation. And cryonic preservation is, at the moment, you did your best to lead a healthy life, but in the end, you still die of a certain disease. Then you can also, during the times years you were alive, you can pay a heavy subscription fee to a couple of institutions, and this is the institution you can see on the picture is well known, is Alcor. And this is Max Moore, just like Anders, one of the rock stars in the domain of transhumanism, but he's also the director of the Alcor institutions. And there you can preserve your head or your whole body. The latter one is also where you pay a higher subscription fee. And then you are being re-awoke after 50 years, after 100 years, when the technology is up to date to make you come alive and also to help you cure from the disease in which you passed away in our current day and age. And this sounds like, oh, this is from the series, from the movie Passengers, for example. But still, there are already people in this state. This is sort of estimate about 200, I think. And also the first person that got into this cryonic state was in 1967. It was James Bedford. So still, my main takeaway is you think of these things as science fiction, but it's actually already happening. But what if you think about, do we still need this body? And do we need to do everything to keep this sack of flesh or this bag of water to keep it fit and healthy? Why can't we upload our consciousness, our brain into the cloud or into a robot? And just like I mentioned with the other technologies, this is already something that scientists are working on. This is an interview I did with Randall Koenen. He's a Dutch neuroscientist. He works for Cornell and Neuralink, but he's also the founder of Carbon Copies. That's an organization that strives to further the development of brain analysis, and then also that you can emulate it and also upload it into the cloud of our computer. And it also makes me think, that's maybe a better solution for some problems that we will face in the long term as human species. Because our bodies, our frail human bodies, they're not made to stay alive in space because of radiation, lack of gravity, these kinds of things. So one day in the future, we have to leave this planet Earth because the sun is getting too hot. And if we want to go to other galaxies, probably the best form is to be as a sort of uploaded astronaut, that we live in silico instead of this biological matter. So these are all things that are already in the works. So I want to end with 3 takeaways. The first one is that technology is what makes us human. And the second one is that all these things seem to be directly from a science fiction book or movie, and they have different timelines, I should admit, but they're already in the works. There are already researchers, designers, entrepreneurs, also philosophers thinking about these ideas. And the third takeaway is that I think it's important that we also ask these questions like, is having a body, does that make us human? Because that also means how we want to apply certain technologies. So I think it's important that we think about it, talk about it, discuss it with each other, philosophize about it. And besides having scientists, we also probably need imagination, philosophy, and maybe also a little fantasy, just like I had when I was playing the game Deus Ex. So if you like this presentation, you can go to this website, or even better, you go to this tiny.cc/stkn, where you can download this presentation and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. So thank you, and I will look forward to your questions and also to the panel later on.
Thank you, Peter. Well, if you put all of that in order like that, it's almost a shame that with Team Heart we can only focus on one thing at a time, because there seems to be so much. Now, there was already an answer to the question you posed, and I guess the gist of it is what differentiates humans from other living entities is our ability to become self-conscious. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's, I think, a really nice answer from Adriaan Framoulet. I hope I pronounced your name right. That indeed having a consciousness is also what sets us apart from from other species. But still, I think the jury is out, because I think I'm curious if there's not like a really clear answer. And I think what makes us human is, like Anders Sandberg also mentioned, was also already a main idea or a main point of dilemma in the Renaissance, and even Greek philosophers were thinking about it. So I hope we can use the progress in science and technology to give us a more detailed answer. But I think Adrian's answer is right on the path to what we once will know about ourselves.
All right, great. Then I see here another interesting question from Robin Nagel. What is the most popular argument against human augmentation that you've heard in your talks?
The people are most afraid, and I think that was also remarked by Anders, about the speciation. So that there are certain types of technologies, be it increased longevity or maybe neural implants or other things, or CRISPR, that are only available for people, A, that are willing to use that kind of technology, but B, also able to buy the technology. And that you, instead of having a cultural divide between certain classes in society, or even a social cultural divide, you also get a biological divide, where the rich are able to buy these kinds of upgrades and live longer and be smarter, just like in the series Altered Carbon, for example.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, might become a problem eventually. I also have in that trend a question from Neon Cyborg, which basically asks whether you think what the balance will be between these kinds of transhuman beliefs and religious organizations, and whether they will clash maybe at some point.
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting question. Also, an interesting name, by the way, Neon Cyborg. So kudos for that. You already see it happening. So there's a lot of talk that transhumanism is a new religion, and that we also, our belief in technology. There are also some elements. For example, think of the mind uploading. In a way, you can see that as a sort of heaven for us as a sort of as humans. So there, but what's also interesting I want to share with you is that I also went to a course a summer course at a university that was also connected to the Vatican Church 2 years ago. And what really surprised me, I must say, I'm an agnostic or atheist. What really surprised me is that the Vatican actually is already thinking about it. We had a course on genetic modification, on CRISPR, on doing it with embryos. That was also really in the headlines at that day and age. So they are aware of it, and I think they also need to adapt, like they also did in history when certain new technological developments came. But I'm curious also. Maybe it's also an interesting question for the panel. If we see transhumanism as a new religion, or if other religion will also adapt some of the ideas or technologies. So really interesting question.
All right. And then we have another interesting question here from Joosten S., which is various animal species have mastered some form of tool. Could be elephants, chimpanzees, or ravens, and even some tool crafting. But what do you think differentiates this use of tools from technology that humans work with?
Nice question, Jonna. You paid a lot of attention and came with a critical question. So I think that also distinguishes us as humans, that we also think critically. What I think is that we also combine our specialty, that we use technology, with another other characteristic that also was mentioned in one of the previous question, that we also have consciousness. And one definition of consciousness is that you can plan ahead, that you have ideas about how things are going to play out if you use the technology. And I'm not really aware if elephants and chimpanzees and ravens have the same kind of future planning when they use their kind of technology. So it's really interesting question. But if I have an answer, I would think that it's the combination of these two elements.
Okay, and then maybe I have one more question from our side before we go into the break. You mentioned the Deus Ex games. I was also a big fan of those in the past, and specifically in the modifying of the human body there. But of course, I believe you're no stranger to tinkering around with the human body yourself. And I was curious, what do you think the ultimate human looks like, and what forms of enhancing human abilities are you yourself looking forward to the most?
Wow, yeah. Like I mentioned, I have also, as a cyborg futurist, I also have implanted technology in my hand, the so-called grinder technology. So I have now a chip where my contact information is on it, and in a couple of weeks I have another chip in which I can pay. I think that this also, if you talk about the future, the best way is also to experiment and really feel how the technology is influencing your life and how other people respond. And I think in the most ideal sense, we think I will follow Anders Sandberg's example, who talked about the open future. I think it will also be interesting that you have also a morphological freedom, that you can decide for yourself how you want to shape and enhance and augment yourself. And I think for me, the ultimate enhancement is, I like to do sports. So I would like to have some bionic legs and some artificial blood and some maybe some other things. But I also like to increase my brain power. So maybe combine different sources in a faster way with each other. So I'm not sure how the future human looks, but I kind of fell in love with a major from Ghost in the Shell. So if I go for one, then I go for that as the human of the future.
Okay, yeah, clear. A lot to look forward to, I'd say. Peter, thank you very much for the talk, and we'll see each other back at the panel discussion. And then I think it is time for us to go into the break and have